Well, good morning. Welcome to Grover Hill Zion United Methodist Church here at 204 South Harrison Street in Grover Hill. We're glad you're viewing. We hope this message will be helpful to you. And of course, you're more than welcome to come and fellowship with us at 10:30 on Sunday mornings or any other time we have activities happening here. Well, this is the fifth Sunday of Easter. And last week we talked a little bit about Psalm 23. And now I'm going to talk a little bit more today about Psalm 23, verses 3 through 6. And in it, David, as he's writing this Psalm 23 about the shepherd and the sheep, you can see Jesus and the sheep in this as well if you listen closely. So, as I say, we're speaking from Psalm 23, verses 3 through 6 today. And the topic is, Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. David is a shepherd, and as he writes Psalm 23, he is writing from the perspective of a sheep and the peace and joy the sheep have when the good shepherd, who takes care of all their needs for living, really and truly cares for them. What do you think of when you hear, Thou preparest a table before me? You know, my mind goes back to when I was growing up. Mom, there were 6 of us, so Mom always she did all the cooking, of course, and a lot of household chores. That was a hard job for her, but then she always prepared the table for 6 people there, always, every day, 3 times a day, and that's something. And then, of course, I eat out in a restaurant a lot, and the waitress, I always think about the waitress preparing the table before me, cleaning it off and making it sanitized, and so that I can go in and sit down. She's preparing the table before me so that I can enjoy eating and sit there and relax. And you know, we have a good shepherd, Jesus, who cares for us as well. And of course, another thing we think about is Holy Communion, preparing the table for Holy Communion as well. That's something else that we think about oftentimes when we talk about preparing the table. As David writes this, he has in mind taking his sheep to higher ground for the summer, where the grass is lush and green, where the sheep can fill their bellies and then they can lie down in peace, free from care. They can enjoy life and find rest. These higher grounds are called mesas, which means tables. The pastures on higher grounds are called tablelands. Before sheep can occupy the tablelands, the good shepherd must prepare the table before the sheep. The good shepherd will go ahead of the sheep and survey the land a couple weeks before he wants to use the lands and the pastures. And as he surveys the land, he decides where the various camps will be throughout the summer. And oftentimes the tablelands are hard to reach because they're high up on the mountain, on a plateau. So the shepherd has to make sure the path is clear and for the sheep to walk upon, so that there's no dangers lying in their way. He also carries salt and minerals to keep the sheep healthy, and he selects the best lands for the sheep to lie down in. And then he surveys the lands and looking for poisonous plants, and when he finds them, he destroys them so the sheep won't eat them and die. You know, like humans, it's even though the plants are deadly, some sheep, especially the lambs, will try and eat them anyway, and if they do, they will die because those plants aren't good for them. It's not meant to be in their bodies. And unfortunately, some of us have trouble telling good plants from bad plants, you know. I probably couldn't tell you all the bad plants either. But the shepherd could identify what was dangerous to the sheep. The shepherd then has to clear debris such as sticks and leaves away from the water holes so the sheep can get to the water. If there's any obstacles there, it'll delay them or prohibit them from getting to the water. Earth dams need to be repaired so that they will hold water. And the shepherd then needs to identify which lands can be used a lot, such as the flatlands, and which lands, such as the slopes, can be used less often. Then the shepherd has to check then for signs of predators in the area, like cougars and wolves and bears and other predators. Predators will scatter and kill the sheep. Predators are the enemies of the sheep, and they watch every move the shepherd and the sheep make, watching for an opportunity to wreak havoc upon the flock. Now, the shepherd may not see any predators, but he has to be ever mindful that they might be in the area. Well, that sure sounds like a lot of work, doesn't it? Caring for sheep. The good shepherd will do everything within his power to protect the sheep that he loves and cares for. It's quite an awesome responsibility, isn't it? He literally prepares the table before the sheep in the presence of their enemies. The shepherd tends the sheep as the predators look on, watering their lips. You can see that there's a lot to do for a shepherd and the well-being of the sheep. Because the shepherd made the lonely sacrifice for the sheep, they thrive and flourish. The shepherd then is always with the sheep, and they sense a feeling of safety and security. Thus, they are happy sheep, and they are content and rejoice, I would even say. I wonder if the sheep ever think about or even know what was done on their behalf so that they could live the good life, or if they just take it for granted. You know, we kind of take things for granted too, don't we, in our human life. You know, it is the heart's desire of the shepherd that the sheep have a happy and abundant and prosperous life. In the Christian life, Christ is the good shepherd who cares for the flock. Christ left his lofty position on high, laid aside his divinity, and came to earth in human form because he loves the sheep of his fold, and they were in danger of losing eternity. Christ, the Good Shepherd, has already gone before us wherever we may go. He has prepared the table for us in the presence of our enemies, those who would like nothing better than to destroy God's people. Peter writes in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, that Satan goes around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may torment and devour. In the Christian life, there are valleys and mountains. It doesn't mean that there won't be problems or danger in our lives. Sometimes in life, there are predators. There are poisonous weeds, storms, Satan, and other hazards that we have to deal with. We don't want to deal with them, but sometimes we have to deal with them. Christ prepared the table for you and for me at a great personal cost to himself, suffering and dying upon the cross. In John's Gospel, chapter 15:13, Jesus tells us that there is no greater life than this, than the one who lays down his life for his friends. Isn't that something to celebrate, to rejoice about? That God gave up the very thing that was most important to him for the sake of the sheep, for the sake of humanity, for you and me and for the world. When I come to the Lord's table and partake of Holy Communion, which is the feast of thanksgiving for his care and love, it's a remembrance of what he did and is doing in my life, and a representation, a representation of his sacrifice for the world. I sometimes wonder if I do fully appreciate what it cost him to prepare this table for me. Like the Good Shepherd is overjoyed when he sees that his sheep are thriving because of what he has done, so Christ is pleased when I walk in the way of holiness, selflessness, contentment in his care, and enjoying the intimacy of his companionship. We find all of these things when we walk near to him, when we walk in the way of holiness, when we keep our eyes focused on righteousness, when we live the life of holiness. Christ blesses us with all these things. He loves you and he cares for you. Amen.